Hi, I'm Cara Boatswain, founder and editor of Australian Gluten-Free Life magazine, and today I'd like to cover a topic that is a very important one for people with celiac disease: cross-contamination. When you're sharing a house with people who consume gluten, you need to be extra careful you don't accidentally and unknowingly consume any. It's not impossible to safely coexist. Here's what you need to know. Tip number 1. Label everything. Once a knife or spoon has touched gluten-containing bread or crackers, it cannot be used in a jar of jam or mayonnaise without potentially leaving behind traces of gluten. To avoid this, keep your own butter, spreads and condiments clearly labelled as gluten-free and explain to gluten eaters why it's important that they leave these products just for you. Also, manufacturers sometimes add gluten-containing ingredients to unexpected products, such as sauces, curry pastes and stocks. You may find it helpful to also label these gluten-free substitutes in your fridge and pantry to ensure you don't pick up the wrong one by mistake. Tip number 2. Keep it on the top shelf. If you accidentally spill something in the fridge or a loaf of bread isn't wrapped up properly, drips and crumbs are going to fall from the top to the bottom. To ensure gluten isn't making its way to your safe foods, make the top shelf of your fridge a gluten-free zone. This will make it easier for you to locate your gluten-free products and reduce cross-contamination risks. Tip number 3. You may want your own toaster. To avoid cross-contamination, you may wish to toast your bread separately to ensure it's gluten-free. For decades, experts recommended people with celiac disease have a dedicated toaster just for gluten-free bread. However, this is being reconsidered as a result of a study published in 2019. In an effort to determine the extent of gluten contamination on gluten-free bread when toasted in shared toasters, researchers toasted gluten-free bread in machines that were not cleaned and had visible gluten on them. 40 slices of gluten-free toast were taken away to be tested for any gluten contamination. The results were surprising. 36 of the 40 slices of gluten-free toast contained no detectable gluten. The remaining 4 slices had between 5 and 10 parts per million of gluten detected, which is considered gluten-free outside of Australia and New Zealand. The international food standards in Europe, Canada, and the United States of America allow up to 20 parts per million of gluten to be in a food labelled as gluten-free. Tip number 4. One at a time. Good news! You don't have to invest in a separate gluten-free microwave, but don't cook or reheat gluten-free and gluten-containing foods at the same time. The internal space in most microwaves is small and things often boil over. Heat your gluten-free food on its own to prevent gluten-containing food coming in contact with your meal, and give it a good wipe out afterwards. Tip number 5. Ditch the wood. Wood is porous, which means wooden spoons and other cooking utensils can harbour hidden gluten if they've been used to prepare gluten-containing dishes. Either invest in your own clearly labelled set of utensils or use metal or plastic utensils instead. If you regularly prepare gluten-containing and gluten-free food at the same time, we recommend having utensils in 2 different colours. Stick to one for gluten-free and another for gluten-containing. You don't want to stir the gluten-free pasta with the gluten-containing ladle. It means you'll need to cook a whole new batch, and we know how long that can take. Tip number 6. Chop chop. Another place where gluten can be left behind is your chopping board. Sharp knives often make indentations into the board and they can harbour crumbs. We recommend getting a chopping board that is only used for gluten-free products in the same colour as your gluten-free cooking utensils. Tip number 7. Foil your grill or barbecue. Sausages, meatballs and patties are sometimes thickened with gluten-containing ingredients or have been marinated in a sticky gluten-containing sauce. Anything left behind can be a source of cross-contamination for those following a gluten-free diet. Despite what you may have heard, gluten cannot be burnt off at high temperatures. So if you're cooking gluten-free products under the same grill or on the same barbecue as gluten-containing items, lay a sheet of heavy-duty aluminium foil before you cook the gluten-free items. Tip number 8. the fry-up. When frying food, you'll need to use clean oil or a separate fryer to cook gluten-free items. If you do want to use the same oil, cook the gluten-free item first. The same goes for cooking pasta. You'll need to cook the gluten-free pasta in its own water in a separate pot, or cook the gluten-free pasta first. I hope you've enjoyed this short video with some tips on how to avoid cross-contamination in your home. For more tips, expert advice, and lots of delicious gluten-free recipes, visit our website. Just click the link below.